Hey World History peeps, another video. Today we're going to talk about DBQ sourcing, but first I wanted to give you a really good joke. Should I do it, Ms. Gibson? Should I do it?
No.
Oh well, I'm going to do it anyway. So here goes, ready? There are 3 unspoken rules to life. Yeah, I know, that was great, wasn't it? Oh well, let's start with the video part and intro. So yesterday I gave you the 2011 DBQ on the Green Revolution, so gotta enjoy the atmosphere right now. It's a nice day anyway. I wish I was outside, but I know it's not. Anyway, so what I was really wanting to show you is how do we look at these documents and how do we analyze these people and what do we look at to source the document? Because right, you all can tell me what's in the document, what's being said. That's usually not a problem. That's pretty simple and basic and easy to do. But the problem with sourcing is you need to have a way to evaluate whether or not we can trust the source. We can't just simply say that there's a bias and that's it. So let's go right into this so we don't waste too much time. The prompt I had in mind for this one, if we were to adapt it to a 2020 style, would be create an argument that assesses the impacts of the Green Revolution. So let's go see how we can do that. Document number 2 from the 2011, coming from Dr. Norman Borlaug. So he's winning the Nobel Prize. This is something that takes years to accomplish. The Peace Prize we hear about every year, that's done within the year. But the scientific ones, they usually can take 5 to 10 years at the least to get their Nobel Prize, because it has to demonstrate that their contributions did something that was lasting and worthy. So he's receiving this award and talking about how great and important this was to growing of agriculture. One of the readings that I would have wanted you all to read had a lot to do with the contributions and impact of the Green Revolution. One of the things he did was combine different types of grains, particularly rice, and adapted them based on the varieties he had available. Some of them grow too slowly, some grew too fat and couldn't withstand certain areas, but some of them had resistances to certain diseases in different places. And he would blend them or hybridize. The properties would carry over to this new plant, this hybrid plant, and then with added fertilizer, they grow quite rapidly and exactly what they need, and then produce a lot more on a larger scale in areas that previously couldn't do that. Particularly in India and Mexico, these places went from importing grains all the time and food to exporting them. And so he's looking back at these contributions worldwide. Of course he did an amazingly good job. The only thing he says as a concern is we've got to watch our population growth rate. And if we don't monitor growth rate, then food scarcity will still become an issue. So as we look on the first document, we're looking at the Green Revolution being a positive and something really good. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, yes, me from the past. Couldn't you just say that he was biased because he was proud of his accomplishments? Duh. No, you cannot just say they're biased and here's why and call it a day. You have to understand why they are biased and what's influencing their decisions. For Dr. Borlaug's case, he's looking back at all the success of his career. He does not want to look or think about right now either the time in which he is speaking or about some of those negative aspects to the Green Revolution. Another way of saying this is still 1970, and some of these major issues that you're going to see in later documents haven't popped up yet. So his viewpoint is still seeing the positives and the improvements to the countries that have changed through these programs. So there's 2 ways of looking about whether or not you can trust his view of things, whether he's looking back on some of the work he's done and seeing great accomplishment, and that's why he's propping it up and not really the time to talk about the negatives, or it's too early to tell. And you can't fault him or say anything. This isn't a negativity thing. Having a bias isn't necessarily bad. It's what you do with it or how it's used. So in this case, you could say you could trust what he's saying, and some of the biggest problems are not going to come up yet. So looking on to the next document, particularly number 3, let's look at that one. We're looking at India's Minister for Food and Agriculture. Now, his point of view, he's an important position within the government. So his view on things might be slanted to be more positive, to think that global impact will be helpful, and seeing the good. So let's look exactly about what he says, or stuff that might give it away. If you look further past his role in food and agriculture, his term ends in 1967, yet he's in an interview in 1970. So he's out of power by the time he's talking. So there's a lot of changes that could happen, especially if he's a political appointee. He could be looking at, I did something really good, let's look at what we did really good, and focusing on the good as his legacy. So his bias of looking towards his past and saying, I did a good job, could be stemming from his own concerns about the problems. So when it talks about his role in this or his involvement, he's going to say how positive and beneficial, because that's the people he worked with. If you're really higher up and you're going to go visit farms, you're not going to say, I want to go check out, some person I don't know's random farm. You want to see the success stories so that your government succeeds. That's the kind of bias you need to bring up. You cannot just say he worked for the government and they provided funds to help the Green Revolution. No, he had a vested interest in his policies and career as a politician to make sure that the stuff that they enacted would be carried out and successful. So that's the kind of level of depth you need to add to it. Why or why not can we trust it? Or to what degree can we trust it? So is he going to tell us the truth? Probably, more than likely. But he's also going to look at more positives than negatives. And that's really where we can say, we can trust what he's saying, but I think where he's leaving out some stuff that he's not. So when you source that in a paper, you don't necessarily have to bring it just all the way back. You just have to analyze, this person is coming from this position and seeing this, which means he probably only got exposed to the successful businessmen who are making money here. He wasn't seeing every single case, but he's also looking back at his career and saying, you know what? I did a good job and we should have been doing this longer, but he was only in it for 3 years, so you never know what happened. Now, to put things in picture, in document 4, it's written in 1987, and we're seeing a lot of the negatives starting to pop up. We also start seeing not only the negatives, but who's affected, who's benefiting, and it classifies different groups of people that are and are not benefiting from the Green Revolution. So instead of it being this great savior of food equality for everyone, it's still now, according to this, it's turning into inequality once again, based on wealthy landowners, based on men versus women and access to resources. So it still has some inequalities that it was meant to get rid of. So this document, I don't know what Focus is, but it's a newsletter. It's not a magazine. So it might be a confirmation bias of where it's coming from. You don't necessarily have to be 100%. You could say one possibility. If you're going to say, man, Mr. Johnson's really biased being a Caps fan, why? Why would I be biased as a Caps fan? Well, it could be he's liked the Capitals for a very long time, at least for the last 25 years, because he wore, a Caps jersey from 1997. It could be that he's lived in DC all his life. So of course he's been exposed to those same teams, and those are the teams he's rooted for. So when it comes to rooting for a team, he's going to choose the one he's been closest to. And really, you could also say they recently won the Stanley Cup. So he's a bandwagon fan who just hopped on board, and now he's going to support them because he found his hockey team. So you don't have to be 100% right. You just have to put into question some possibilities. Because unless you sit there and talk to me and say, Mr. Johnson, why are you so biased for the Capitals? You're not going to find out. And no one's going to reveal their bias anyway. I'm not going to be like, I'm not biased towards the Caps. They're the best because they're the best team ever. Like every Redskins fan or anything else. So that's the point there. It's not necessarily being right. It's calling into question how accurate they are and whether we can trust the source. You're still arguing the source, but you're arguing its trustworthiness. In document number 5, we're looking at an Indian physicist who's writing in a paper called Ecology about nature and environmentalism. So already we're looking at, well, what's her angle? And her angle is going to be on the impact on the environment. So we look at her account and we see that she's writing some pretty negative stuff about how bad it all is. So we could take this source on 2 different ways. One, we could say that she's a physicist. What is she doing reporting in an environmental magazine? And how is she knowledgeable in that source material to be able to talk about what she's talking about with the level of scientific accuracy as some others that would be more closely associated to her field? What's a physicist talking about biology? So that's one thing you could put into it, is she's obviously angry, but she's probably not fully qualified to talk about this stuff at that level. You could say clearly by her negative tone and whatnot, you're going in a magazine that already has its own set of ideas and it already has its biases. So basically it's appeasing the crowd or appeasing who they're talking to. The other way you can look at it though is she could have been from this area or knows people from this area as an Indian physicist. As an Indian, she has seen what the Green Revolution can do and that it can be negative because she's probably been around it. She probably had enough wealth to get out there to talk. So that's the only reason why a physicist would be talking, is that she has personal knowledge of how bad this has been. So what does that mean? Well, this personal knowledge means she's probably experienced some of these hardships. And so some of this could be accurate. Is a single person account ever the reason for accuracy? No. There has to be more to it than just, oh, well, she was probably there. She probably knows someone and that's it. No, she probably has known someone and she might have come from this region. So the only way she would have this information is she knows where to get it. She's a scientist, obviously knows scientific method and the methods of research and looking up information. And secondly, she probably has been affected it personally. So personal effects plus scientific knowledge, she probably knows what she's talking about despite her being a physicist. So that's two different ways I looked at the same document and attacked the source and said whether or not I could use it. If we're still trying to paint the picture that the Green Revolution both improved the amount of food and quality for people, at the same point hurt the environment and hurt others, we can look at both of those issues and then look at these documents and how they fit. So document 6, where you see food supply and population, you could easily correlate that with Dr. Balog's report about we gotta watch how many people are born. We have to watch population growth rates. Because for that reason alone, with the food supply as well as the population growth climbing together, it still creates inequalities of food that continue. So even though it does not give you new information or bias, it does show you a global trend that helps confirm the concerns of Dr. Borlaug. So in document 7, we're looking at this coordinating committee's official public release about how it feels towards a particular topic. And here, this is one of the ones that's showing that food is culture. Now that's all in the text. So their bias is, what are they worried about, would be the fact that they think their food, that their grain, the seeds that they have, are so tied to their people, their land, and how they've done things, that introducing new crops will be negative to them. That they see the costs and the problems with growing these plants that are from other places, how they've destroyed their environment or worry about the destruction of their environment. They're looking up and seeing that this is a change in their lifestyle that they do not want. And so they're issuing official press release. So are their facts clear? Yeah, you could probably trust it. If anything, if you're going to tell a farmer they're going to grow new crops, of course they're going to look things up. So their objections are going to be rooted in some form of facts. Do they exaggerate too much or not? With this official statement, you're trying to present a policy issue that you're going to say is an important one to the legislature, to politicians, and to supranational organizations that will work together, so that those in the Green Revolution that are supporting us are not looking at the negative aspects towards culture and the people that are involved. And that's one concern they all have. If you're interested in writing the DBQ so you can get a grade or replace the last grade from third 9 weeks, the prompt would be, develop an argument that analyzes the impact of the Green Revolution. If you want to practice the DBQ, you can go for it. One suggestion, there's a lot of points now and for outside evidence. What I want you to try to find, since it's open book, this AP exam, and open note, find a piece of evidence that would support whatever you are claiming if you were to write the DBQ, and find that evidence. Find a document that you can support. Look at the rubric that I am sending you. So maybe teachers have made updated rubrics to give you an idea of what's going to be evaluated this time as well. So thanks for watching. Here's a cheesy video at the end as always, and good luck all. Laters.